well, hello and welcome to Wild Traxx. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Chris Curran, who is a friend of mine. He's an audio engineer. I actually had to write down, this is how much stuff he's done. I had to write down a list of all the things that he's done.
Did you write down that he's a friend of yours?
I did. Actually, I put that at the top. But he's an audio engineer, producer. He's worked at some of the most prestigious music recording facilities in the world, such as the Hit Factory, the Soundtrack Group, and Quad Recording. His album credits, check this out. They include various roles on projects with Foreigner, Sarah McLachlan, Jeff Buckley, MC Hammer.
In the arms of an angel.
That's perfect, but you got to stop there because
we can't pay the copyright.
We don't have the right to license that song. Ice Cube and others. He's a podcast producer, founder of Fractal Recording, which has produced podcasts for Forbes, Dun & Bradstreet, J&J, and many more. And he is the founder and lead instructor of the Podcast Engineering School, which teaches folks how to produce podcasts, audio at a professional level. So clearly, we're going to learn something today.
Oh, I thought we were professional.
Yep. You can find them out at podcastengineeringschool.com. And finally, he is the host of the Podcast Engineering Show. So clearly, he's going to tell us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. So let's welcome Mr. Chris
Curran.
Yay.
Hey guys,
how's it going, buddy?
Yeah, and I once had a guest named Rick Veers on my show.
That's
actually.
right.
Remember that?
I was on that. Yes, that was a fun time. Actually, did we do one or two shows?
Oh, thank God.
Apparently, I wasn't good enough to have back on this show.
For a second, I was worried there for a second there. I thought there was more than one Rick Veers, but we're talking.
There
about
is. That's my dad. He spells his name with a K, though. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You don't want to have my dad on your show. He'll just talk about buffets.
Oh, geez. Well, happy to be here, guys, and congrats on your show, Wild Traxx. This is wild, man.
Thank you. Yeah, we try to get wild. We're not really that wild. It's just the name.
When the shirts come off.
That's true. You know, we wanted to do a show once in our PJs. That would be a fun show, but you sleep naked, so it's probably not going to be a good show. But have you ever done a podcast show in your PJs?
No, actually, no. Like, I know people joke about that, like, oh, I do you wear pants when you podcast and all this funny stuff? But like, nah, I've never done anything crazy like that.
I have done, this is true, I have done Skype calls, like business calls, in my pajamas. Once it was not because I wanted to. I was in my pajamas and I had a call, but I didn't know that it was going to be a video. I thought it was audio. So I answered, I'm like, hey, what's going on? He goes, hey, we're going to turn on the camera. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like racing to grab a hat. I figured if I just shot from the waist up, I did. I threw on a shirt and grabbed a hat and then did the call. Oh, boy, I was panicked.
Trade secrets, my friend. Trade secrets.
It's the joy of working wherever you want remotely with a laptop, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess you've done a ton of stuff, but have you ever done a podcast show like from a hotel room on your laptop?
I've actually done the only thing I've done from a hotel room is a live stream one time I run this live stream called the Podcasters Lounge, and we were at, I think it was Podfest last year or Podcast Movement, and my buddy Ralph M. Rivera, he came to my hotel room and we streamed from the hotel room, which was kind of cool, with one microphone. So we had to.
Oh, you guys had to get close and share and.
Oh, it's so romantic.
Yeah.
Deal with coffee breath. I bet you it didn't smell that great.
Was it in the honeymoon suite?
It's like a heart-shaped tub in the background. That's great. Now, you and I, we've hung out at Podfest. In fact, in a couple of weeks, you and I are going to be doing lunch or dinner, I guess, at Podfest, right? Podfest
totally,
2020. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. So you're you're teaching, or you're doing a session at Are you doing a couple? I think at Podfest.
Yeah, so I'm speaking at Podfest itself, and then on the pre-day, it's a one-day. It's called the Podcast Editors Conference. It's a full-day conference for podcast editors, and I'm on a panel in there as well. So it's just going to be, and I have a booth for my school. So like my head is going to be spinning around my shoulders, I think.
So who's going to be in your booth when you're doing your sessions?
My buddy Josh Wade.
Okay.
Yeah, from recap.fm. Recap.fm, they do talk about TV shows. It's like what do you call them again? When a new episode from certain TV shows come out, they'll do a podcast episode talking about it.
Oh, interesting. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You know,
Pretty cool.
Podfest sounds to me like the world post Invasions of the Body Snatchers. That's what Podfest is.
Podfest, no,
we're
it's not.
celebrating the Body Snatchers now.
No, this is nothing. No, it's
No?
nothing
Okay.
to do with
Nothing
that.
to do
Actually,
with it. All right.
it's at the Orlando World Center, right? Is the hotel that it's in.
Is it? I actually forget.
I think it's in the same place it was in. I hope it's in that because I just booked my room. Actually, true story. I booked my room last night because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a few weeks away. So I searched through my email to make sure. I'm like, yeah, I remember booking it a couple months ago. And I looked and I couldn't find my reservation. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I booked a room and they only had like 5 rooms left. So I booked it and I'm just like,
Wow.
and then all of a sudden I go through my emails and I realized I did book it back in December. I just didn't go to the next page of my search results, so then I had to turn on and cancel my room. But yeah, it's in the Orlando World Center. How many years have they been doing that now?
Probably around 6, I think. It's a great conference. It's not the biggest conference, but it's for like grassroots, regular people podcasting. It's hands down the best one.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool people that are there. It's a great way to network and meet other people, as well as there's a ton of sessions that they have where you can learn a ton of stuff. Everything podcast,
Right?
Podcasting. So yeah. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, so podcasting is my life these days. But you mentioned all the music credits and all that. That was, I went to school for engineering in 91, and then I started working in the studios in 92. And I ended up leaving New York City in 96. So believe it or not, I was only in the big studios for about 4 years. Then I actually produced some just bands on the side by myself in New Jersey for probably 10 years after that. But it's interesting how in such a short span in New York, I was able to work with so many great artists and records and learn so much.
How does that happen? I mean, I'm clueless when it comes. I mean, people. Those engineering schools are full, and I'm sure that it's a pretty big competition for jobs in studios and such. But I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, well, it's called the internship. You go there, you work for free, and you
yes.
work your ass off.
We know a few things about internships.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I started at Quad, and I worked there for about 3 months, and they didn't pay me. I only worked from 9 to 3 every day because I had to commute in from Jersey. So getting there before 9 was like virtually impossible. And then I had to leave because I had an evening job because I had to make some money, right? So I had to leave. So I worked from 9 to 3 Monday through Friday, making no money. And I was cleaning the studios and stuff like that. But you know what? you get a little experience here and there. I mean, Mark Cohn was making his record The Rainy Season while I was there, and I got to meet him and stuff. But I was just an intern. But the assistant engineer on those sessions, I would help him set up, and he let me align the tape machine. Because you have to align the tape machine every morning, right?
What's a tape machine? That's true though. But back in the day, it was reel to reel. You were on 2-inch tape, right?
Oh yeah, and literally before every session, you had to align the tape machine. So he let me do that with that little tool or the alignment tool. And what I'm saying is that you get good experience, and that was the only way to get it. Like how else was I going to do that?
Right. Yeah, you can't walk in and go, "Hey, I just graduated. How about a job?" They're going to look at you and go, "Yeah, back of the line, kid."
Yeah. Well,
empty that trash can.
a friend of mine, Leslie Brathwaite, who's got he honestly has more Grammys than I have fingers and toes. He's worked with he's worked with Beyonce.
Now, granted, Rick did have a horrible industrial accident, so
that's
he does
true.
not have.
I don't have as many toes as everybody else, but even still, it's a lot of Grammys. No, but he got a chance to work with Michael Jackson, but he's worked with really super big names, Cardi B, etc. I could go on, but the point is that he really kind of hit it off because he was working at a studio, and if I remember correctly, he's working with TLC. He was like the assistant, and the main engineer couldn't show up, but they wanted to roll anyway. So they're like, Leslie, jump behind the desk. And long story short, they ended up becoming super good. He became good friends with the girls. And then from there on out, they wanted to start to work with him. And then, boom, there went his career.
Don't go chase.
We can't license the music. We could do this all day. Our falsetto, by the way, is on point between the two of us with the way we harmonize. We can't show you on the air, but we're on point.
It's like an organ. I won't tell you which organ, but
no pitch shifting necessary. I almost had a big break like that too. I think it was like my big opportunity, which actually it didn't pan out. But I was working with Helmet on their record Betty. They were doing overdubs at Soundtrack, and the engineer had a death in the family, and I was the assistant. So the producer, who was T. Ray, and the guy, and they said, well, what are we gonna do? I said, well, look, I could jump in and mix this. I could mix it. I didn't say it like that. I said it much more meekly, right? Because I was just the assistant, and
right.
So they're like, yeah, go ahead. Like they were going to go talk to a few other engineers. And so for a whole day, I got to sit, I was there mixing on a big Neve VR console, and it was great. And they were actually liking what they heard. And I was like thinking to myself, dude, if I do well on this, and if I can literally mix the rest of the record and I get that credit, that's huge for my career. But what happened was they brought in a few other guys. They brought in the guy who worked on their first record. And so this is a story that shows how when you're new, you might think you know a lot or you might know everything, but there's always a bunch of little stuff that you don't know. Because the guy who, I forget his name, he worked on their first record, Meantime. He engineered it and mixed it, Helmet, Meantime. He walks in, he listens back, and it's the mix that I was doing that he's listening to. And he's listening, and he's muting things, muting something on the right and listening, muting something on the left. And then he's also going mono, checking it in mono. And he's and then like for 5 minutes. And I was thinking to myself, like, what? I don't even know what he's doing. Turns out some of the guitars were recorded out of phase, and there was a weird phasing thing going on.
Wow.
But I didn't know it because I didn't know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I literally didn't know.
Wow.
So anyway, you know who they ended up getting to mix the record?
Leslie
Andy
Brathwaite.
Wallace.
Oh. I thought it was going to go full circle. It was who ended up coming in?
Andy Wallace, which
Andy Wallace.
I mean, he's one of the greatest mixers of all time, and he doesn't work cheap either. So
you said this mid 90s or early 90s?
This was in 94, 95. Yeah.
Okay. Right on.
When did you jump over to the Hit Factory?
Yeah, that was in mid 95. And, I was working at Soundtrack for 2.5 years. And I was like, I thought going to a bigger, like a more high profile studio would be awesome. So I actually sort of applied to work there, and they ended up hiring me. But the funny thing is, when I went to work at the Hit Factory, Biggie still came in there. Like I knew Biggie from Soundtrack. And so like a lot of the same rappers would come in there. And so I ended up working with a bunch of the same rappers. But then I also worked with some different music projects and stuff. But I don't know. What I found out was like, even though it's a bigger name and a more prestigious studio, like it was the same kind of BS. You know what I mean? Like people coming into the studio, making a big mess. And like, I'm the assistant engineer and I'm supposed to be like, running mixes down to the 1/2-inch tape and making DAT backups and doing recalls on all the equipment and the board. And yet when I leave the studio, all the crap and food and like I have to clean all that up too. And it's like after a while, it's like, come on, man.
Go from hero to zero in 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you get yelled at because you didn't wipe up the food on the table good enough. And it's like, really? I'm going to get yelled at by my boss for that when we're mixing records and
where's the
whatever.
intern?
Exactly. Well, I guess you would be the intern then. So how long was your hair? Did you have long hair back in the 90s?
No. I kind of always had short hair, or maybe not as short as I have it now, but I'd actually never had long hair. But I did play in bands. I did, and I guess do play the drums. So that's been throughout my engineering career. I've been playing music, except for like the last 12, 13 years. Like ever since about 2005, I haven't played like at all.
Is that what attracted you to working behind the scenes? You were a musician?
Definitely, because in high school, me and my friend Paul were writing songs, and we're like, well, we got to record this. And so My other friend had a 4-track recorder, one of those little Tascam cassette 4-track recorders.
My first recorder was a Tascam cassette. Yep.
Exactly. So I was like, I borrowed that, and then that was it. Because the way my mind works, and I guess my ear, and because in those and with those 4 tracks, you had to record, but you record 4 tracks, but then you got to mix it down to 2 tracks, so you can overdub 2 more tracks, and so like you got to commit to these mixes, and like, I mean, just first getting into recording, that is unbelievably good practice, like. Because you learn, like, you got to get this right because you're going to mix it down. And then if it's wrong, that's it.
You got to redo it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you overdubbed anything, then you can't even use that. So sometimes you trap yourself. But
So when you were coming out of high school and you decided, I think I want to go into engineering, how'd you choose a school? Where'd you go?
I actually went to the recording workshop in Ohio, which is it's a very short program. It's not full sail 4 years. It's nothing like that. It's like,
it's a 30-day program, wasn't it? Oh, 8 weeks. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's like an 8 weeks intense program. And, I loved it because it got so basic as like, how to solder a cable, and, they covered a lot of the basics, which I love. And that's why I do the same thing in my school now. Like, I start out in my school talking about what is sound, because people think they know, but they don't know. And when you're trained in such a technical profession, it's really helpful to start from absolute zero, like nothing, and then build up your knowledge slowly over time, so that when you get higher in your knowledge, you have a firm base to stand on, and that firm base provides confidence.
Right. So much confidence.
Because
so much confidence that when you go to intern someplace, you think you know everything.
Just enough. Yeah, exactly.
Until an actual engineer comes in and goes, "Yeah, you got some phasing going on here, pal."
I think you need a healthy amount of arrogance to get started in the business. You have to have this thing that says, "Yeah, this is what I want to do, and I feel like confident, enough to do it." You got to have that drive. Yeah.
And I remember at Quad, which was the first place I worked, which is where I was an intern. There was Michael Brower was mixing in the whatever on the top floor, or whatever, the penthouse, or I forget what they call it. But and there was like a phone message for him or something, and they're like, "Yeah, go up and give him this message." And I went up there, and I just opened the door to the control room, and I walked in, and I was like, "There's a message for you." And he was there at the board, but then there was other people in there. He stood up, walked toward me, ushered me out, closed the door, and he said, "Don't ever walk into a studio without calling in first. Like, you don't do that." Like it was a really good lesson. Like, you can't just walk around like right. You know everything, and it's your studio, and I'm an assistant here, I can walk into this room. It's like, no, dude. Like, there's clientele in there. There's artistic stuff happening. Like, you can't just walk into some room.
Right.
You just can't do it. But it was a great lesson, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
We've all done that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I remember when I got started. Video production is primarily where I got started doing location sound, and you think you know what you're doing until you get on a few shows and you realize I'm still learning here. But making mistakes. Like, I talked one time, I was talking about some of the crew members. I was saying nice things, but I was still talking about them, and I didn't realize that the ClearCom channels were open and they could hear me in the other room. And so then later on, the shooter pulled me aside. He goes, "Yeah, I appreciate that you were talking about me and saying nice things." He goes, "But you got to remember, there's always a mic open when you're on a set." And I'm like, I never really thought of it that way. And yeah, good lessons, but they're hard to learn at the time, because at the time it's like a huge bruise to your ego. You're like, but you don't understand. And but nonetheless, you learn and you move on.
Exactly. And you never make that mistake again.
No, you do. No, you do not. Yep. So what was your dream growing up? Was your dream to be a musician, to be in the industry, to be a producer, to be an engineer? Like, where did you want to land when you were growing up?
Yeah, so when I was like in 8th grade and 9th grade and 10th grade, like I was really into drumming, and I learned how to play the double bass because I loved metal, Iron Maiden, Metallica, and then I ended up getting into Slayer and Anthrax and just hard, heavy stuff, double bass stuff. So I learned that. I literally, throughout high school, I won't say I perfected playing the double bass that fast, but I could play any song from any of those bands back then. And so I really wanted to be a drummer. I guess I wanted to be a rock star. That's where it started for sure.
Right.
Drumming.
Rock and roll.
Rock and roll is where we all started. What my claim to rock and roll fame is I got to be the roadie for Motley Crue for one show.
All right.
But it was a good show. This was, I got to set up Tommy Lee's drums. I'll never forget that. In fact, the drum throne that he had was a gift from Neil Peart. So it was Neil Peart's drum throne. So I was touching Neil Peart's butt sweat as I was setting out. There was like crystallizations of it on the seat. But yeah, they, what was it? It was their greatest hits tour, I think is what it was. And I got to meet all of the band members because we were there before the show. And Nikki Sixx sat at the table next to me during lunch. It was at the State Theater. It's now the Fillmore.
Did he try to have sex with you?
No, which I was surprised because I had long hair at the time. So I'm sure from the back he thinks I'm hot. But Nikki Sixx I never forget. He was sitting with the crew and just chatting with the rest of us like he was just one of the guys. I always thought that was really, really cool. So.
Did he show you his knife?
No, he must have kept it in his boot at the time. I'm glad he didn't at the time because I didn't know he was into knives. So if he'd have showed me a knife, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to kill me.
My rock and roll claim to fame.
Is this the Huey Lewis
I was a roadie for Huey Lewis in the News.
Sweet.
And it was the hardest job I ever had in my life.
Really?
Yes.
Because Motley Crue was pretty easy for me.
I was unloading trucks. That's what I was doing.
Oh.
And that stuff is heavy. And summertime tours, forget about it. And so you work your tail off, and then the show's going on where you can just kind of sit there and take it easy. And then the show ends, and then the band says, "Hey, we're gonna go out and grab a few drinks. You guys want to come?" Yeah, as soon as we're done unloading or loading all this stuff back up, we'll be with you.
Yeah,
but no, you want to go home and go to bed.
Yep.
It was horrible.
Yeah, I did a few gigs. I did pyro for a couple of years in Detroit. Actually, I did pyro for a long time, but for shows, for like rock and roll shows and stuff, it was 2 or 3 years I did stuff in Detroit. So I worked with like Rammstein and like Limp Bizkit. Rammstein. Dude, those guys light everything on fire, including themselves.
Yeah, right.
It's true story. God. So I had to, they had their own pyro guy that they traveled with. But they needed somebody local with a license, which was me, to actually pull the permits for the show. So I had to call the fire marshal, get the permit, have the fire marshal had to come out to the show. The venue had to check out all of the, the stage and all the things that were going to light on fire. So he looks at the sheet of what they wanted to do, and it's like literally like light the guitar player on fire, light the stand on fire, light the drums on fire. They wanted to shoot grid rockets over the crowd.
Yeah, and set the crowd on fire.
Yeah, set the crowd on fire. And so he looked at the list and he's like, "Oh my God!" And I said, "No, this stuff will be safe." And first thing he did was he said no to the grid rockets. Like that wasn't. He goes, "I'm not even gonna. I'm not asking twice. The grid rockets got to go." And, and then I talked to the pyro guy beforehand. And I said, okay, I need to verify all of your equipment. I need to make sure that everything is flame-proof because they had a giant rug that they put down for the band members to stand on. And I'm like, all right, I need to verify that this is flame-proof. He says, yeah, everything's flame-proof. So the fire marshal comes over, cuts a corner, which is standard practice, cuts a little corner of the carpet, takes a lighter to it, and then all of a sudden, the whole thing goes up in flames. And he looks at me and he goes, "No show. I'm not approving this show." This is like 3 hours before doors open, and the producer freaks out. The stage manager at State Theater freaks out, and everybody's looking at me like it's my fault. I'm like, "But he said it was flameproof." So I said, "Don't worry, I can handle this." And literally in 2 hours, I made a mad dash to a theater company. Supply company, and got some, I think it was Roscoe, I can't remember what it was called, C36 or whatever their flame retardant was.
Right.
I doused the entire rug. It was just sopping wet to make sure that it would absorb. And I had to I convinced the fire marshal to come back an hour before the show and give us a second test.
You're a Rammstein hero.
Oh my God. And you know what? The band, actually it was a good time, but I got to chat with some of the band members who speak German. So that was really fun because I literally got nothing.
That's because they're German.
Exactly. I didn't think that at the time. So I'm talking to the guitar player and I'm just rambling on and I ask him a question and finally he just looks at me and goes,
"Was ist los?"
I'm like, all right, sorry about that. And I went, "Achtung, Dr. Jones." And as soon as I did that, he started laughing because he knew exactly what I was trying to do. He's like, all right, I get the reference. But fire marshal came back. checked the rug, and the show went on. But sure enough, I'm not kidding. Everything was on fire at some point during the show. So that was yeah. I did stuff for I did stuff for Kid Rock and Eminem and D12 and a lot of stuff like stage gerbs and flash pots and things like that. But yeah.
Was this all in Detroit?
Yeah, this was all Detroit stuff. Yeah, I did.
And was it all in the same venue?
No, some of it there's different venues around town. I mean, I did other pyro stuff out of state for like theatrical productions and films and things like that. But in terms of rock and roll shows, that was all in Detroit. Yeah. So
cool.
And then the whole Great White fiasco happened. And as soon as that happened, I used to build and design pyro boards for companies, and they would buy them from me, and I would set up 40 channel boards and all this kind of stuff. And as soon as the Great White thing happened, I said, I'm done. Now I'm tapping out. I don't want to be responsible for anything like that. And that was it. I sold all my gear and got out of it. So,
dude, that's like, wow.
Yeah, I guarantee you that that Great White thing was not licensed.
Oh, I'm sure those guys, it'll be okay. I guarantee you somebody at some point before the show said, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. And then, you have a tragedy like that. But, yep, so that was my little stint in rock and roll.
Nice. And Rammstein was like, we'd like to thank Rick Veers for making this possible and for all his work. We're going to light him on fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nope.
Actually, it was more like, und we like to thank
yes, exactly.
Rick Veers.
Du hast, Rick Veers. Du hast.
Und set them on fire.
It was a good show. Kid Rock was always fun to work. You work with Kid Rock as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's funny. Fun guy.
So I did a lot of. I did pyro for Kid Rock for some of his shows. And I want to say I did something for a music video. I did video production with them. So we'd hire to do like behind the scenes stuff or the Kid Rock Christmas special. We shot commercials for that. Yeah,
that's a family favorite.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you got a great Kid Rock story for when you ended up going to Russia.
Yeah, we went to Russia. We were doing a documentary on Igor Larionov. He was retiring, so he's going back to play with the Russian Five and all that kind of stuff in Moscow. So he brought all his friends, and one of them was Kid Rock, and we had a great time. It was just a bunch of Michigan hillbillies in Moscow, wide-eyed, wondering, are they going to throw us in jail?
Well, at one point, you ended up in a venue or a restaurant or something, like a really nice, fancy restaurant.
Yeah. There was a big gala that the government was putting on. The Russian government was putting on for Igor, and it was at this grand ballroom by the Kremlin. And I've got a good story about that too, but I'll save that for another time about the Kremlin. But so we get there, and they tell us, there was a dress code. And everybody shows up in, button-down shirts and ties, and even though even the film crew. And just as Kid Rock walks in, looking like Kid Rock, with his greasy hair and his hat and his blue jeans, he looks like Kid Rock, right? It's a rock star. Just as he walks in, this Russian official says, "And no hats are allowed." And Kid Rock turns white. And he goes, "Oh, man, I wish somebody would have told me." And he takes off his hat, and it's all matted. He's got that hat hair. And he's like, "I wish somebody would have told me I'm going to look like an idiot." And I turned around and said, "Put the hat back on. You're Kid Rock. Be a rock star."
Yeah.
Just walk in, and nobody's going to say anything. You think so? Yeah. You'll be all right. And he put the hat on and turned into Kid Rock, and he walked in. Nobody said boo.
Yeah.
Nobody said boo.
It's Kid Rock.
Yeah,
wow.
It's Kid Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question about his career though, because he was back in was it late '90s when he sort of blew up or something?
Mid '90s.
Yeah,
it was mid '90s. Really?
Yeah, it was mid to late. No, actually, it was late '90s. It was like '97, '98.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was watching. It was when he blew up. The 25th anniversary of Woodstock is when he blew up, which would be
99.
99? Is that when it was?
No, 94.
94. So 94, that's because before that he was regional, and he did a state theater thing. You did that,
right? Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
And but I remember I was watching the 25th anniversary on MTV, and Kid Rock was debuting to a national audience, and it's summertime, and he's wearing his big white fur coat and his big white fur hat, and I went, who the hell does this guy think he is?
He's Kid Rock.
And he killed.
Oh, he
killed.
crushed it.
And
That guy could rock an
after
audience.
that, it went nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy could rock an audience. And the funny thing is off stage, he was Bob. He was Bob. He's the nicest guy in the world. He just wanted to have a beer and hang out with everybody. And as far as I'm concerned, I've never experienced any ego from him. Like, he was Kid Rock, but at the same time, he was just like hanging out with everybody else.
Well, we were at a show in Moscow. We went to this club in Moscow where this band was playing, kind of like a Rammstein band, except the band their persona were vampires, and it was really heavy metal. It was a Russian heavy metal band, and they were fantastic. I couldn't believe it when I was filming it, and after their first song, I turned to one of the other cameramen and I went, "Oh my God! Did you just see that? Did we just see that?" And I mean, it was out of this world. I couldn't believe it. Didn't understand a word they were singing, but it was just out of this world. Well, another band got up there to play, and they're playing some bluesy American rock, right? And they were all right. And Kid Rock gets up there, and he's trying to get them to play this in E, and give me this beat and stuff like this, and they weren't jiving. So he went around to every musician, and he did, he went over to the drums, he played the drums, he goes, "This is how you're going to do it." He went over to the guitar, "This is how you're going to do it." He went to the keys, "This is how you're going to do it." I mean, every instrument. I was like, geez, this guy's an incredible talent. So he kills. I mean, he rocks the house. The whole place is going nuts, and this is a small venue. And it's hot, and it's sweaty, and people are screaming, and he's just, he's being Kid Rock to the 1000th degree, man, just going nuts. The show ends, and we're following him out. I'm right behind him with my camera. We're doing the kind of behind the scenes, going through the stairwell. And he turns around and grabs my camera and he goes, "I own the rights to all of that."
He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
A little bit of a businessman as well. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So, yeah.
So do you got any good fun rock and roll stories with people that you've worked with? Any good, recording sessions that you had?
Oh, I mean, there's tons. There's so much rap that I worked on.
How many times have you been shot?
Actually, okay, 0, but with an asterisk because
boy, you were shot at.
I didn't even hear any. Well, no, we heard gunshots several times, but no, in the studio, I was working with the Beatnuts, and I worked on their one album called Street Level, and I literally probably worked months on this one record with these guys, so I got to know them pretty well and got to know all the songs, and one night that was we were in Studio E at Soundtrack, and little down the hall and to the left was Studio G, which is where Andy Wallace ended up mixing a bunch of stuff on the SSL G in there. Studio G had an SSL 6000G in there. Anyway, there's another band in that Studio G, and the Beatnuts. Something happened in the hallway. There was a little altercation, and all of a sudden, 2 of the guys come in the room. They're like, "We're going back to Brooklyn. We'll be back." And we're like, and I don't know.
Never a good sign,
dude. They come back like probably an hour and a half later. Come in the room, sit on the couch, and they start cleaning their guns. And I was like, I'm like just looking around like, what is gonna happen here? Like, dude, this is. And so anyway, luckily it never came to that. But yeah, I mean, just I've never been that close to guns.
Nothing will inspire you to do your best at your job than somebody cleaning a weapon in the back of the room. So how those mixes coming, Chris? Click, click. I used to work at, in fact, it's funny. I was just there yesterday. I had lunch right next door to 54 Sound, which is where I used to work with Eminem and D12 and some other people that used to record there. And it's a true story. Marshall would show up with a bulletproof vest on.
Oh, his car was bulletproof.
Yeah, he would drive to work with a bulletproof vest, and he'd had if I remember, it was a 9mm or something in the front seat, like literally just laying in the front seat in case he needed it, kind of thing. So it's like, it's great to be, the rap star and all that, the fame and fortune, but at the end of the day, you're driving to work in a bulletproof vest. By the way, I had to wear a bulletproof vest once for work. I was doing location sound for the Detroit Humane Society. And there was this show, I don't know if it's still on the air, but it's called Animal Cops.
Oh, I remember
And it's like
that,
cops, except it's people that are abusing animals, and so these people, the Detroit Humane Society has to go in and intervene. And they didn't tell me this. They just said, show up, at the Detroit Humane Society. Here's your call time, and, we'll get you, bring the sound gear, etc. So I show up, and they're like, all right, here's your vest. And I'm like, what? Like, oh, yeah, we get shot at sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to be shot at. True story. Go ahead.
Did you ask the classic question? Well, what about my face?
I'm like,
yeah, right.
At that point, I was like, is there like hazard pay involved or, but I'll never forget that I was freaked out, man, wearing a bulletproof vest. And because some of those people, they use unfortunately, they use the dogs for dog fighting and all that kind of stuff. And so these guys are the heroes that are coming in and rescuing the dogs. But the people that have the dogs, they've got guns. And so, you don't want to be around them when they're there and you're taking their dogs.
Right. Oh, God.
Yeah.
That's rough, man.
It was rough.
That's rough. That's why the rappers
rough. Just see, I couldn't.
Now we're gonna break to a commercial.
Hashtag dad jokes.
That's why the sessions I liked a lot better were the ones where like Biggie did this a lot. He'd come in and someone would bring like literally like a mayonnaise jar, a big mayonnaise jar full of weed. And they'd come in and sit there, and it was one guy's job to just sit there rolling the whole night. And and those sessions were, everyone's just kind of chill, right? There's nothing.
Of course, everybody was chill.
going on.
It's what we call contact buzz.
Why a mayonnaise jar?
Hopefully, they cleaned out the mayonnaise first, because some things you don't want sticking to your weed.
To me, that's just what it looked like. I don't know what kind of jar it was, but it was that size, like a good size. It wasn't like, a little tiny jar, right?
Wow.
I remember
like it was a jar. You'd look at it and go, oh my God, like that much.
Yeah.
Like, it was shocking how,
I remember at 54 Sound, so Marshall has a thing for Taco Bell. I don't know if he still does, but he did back in the day. And so whenever it was mealtime, they would literally go to the drive-thru and like order like 5 of everything on the menu, and then they would just bring it on like a tray, and then he would just walk up and go, I'll have that, and he would grab what he wanted, and then the rest of it they kind of threw to his crew, his security guards and all that stuff. But did you have like any kind of unique experiences where they were bringing in anything exotic for the talent?
Other than weed?
I don't think anything exotic, but as you may know, in big studios like that, there's a menu book, which is a book of all menus from all the different places nearby that can deliver food. So, you want Chinese, you want anything and everything. So many times we would just almost with a lot of artists, they would just order food. They'd order so much food, like $500-$800 worth of food, $1,000 worth of food. Like it just gets silly after a while. But so just the normal food ordering stuff. But one funny thing that happened was, what was it? The one guy from the Beatnuts, he ordered a milkshake, and it came, and we gave it to him, and he drank it, and he's like, this ain't no milkshake. This is milk. I guess it had melted, but then he yelled at me. He's like, "Why he yelled at me," and I'm just like, "Really, dude? You're gonna yell at me because the milkshake is now milk?" Whatever.
Was he cleaning a gun as he was yelling at you? Because that would really kind of amp up that story.
How about this? I'm always curious about this because you hear about this all the time, sound studios. You ever had bands who didn't pay their bill and you had to hold the tapes?
Oh.
Well, yeah. So the office of the studio, they take care of all that. So yeah, all the tapes. We were told we don't give out any tapes, and even cassette tapes. Sometimes the management would tell us, don't. If these people want a cassette tape of the mix, don't give it to them. Now, a lot of clients, they would let us do all that. But yeah, when there was a question like, are these guys going to pay?
Right.
It was always like, no, we don't give them anything. They can do the session, but they don't get anything until they pay.
Do you ever have anybody show up remember that scene in Boogie Nights when Mark Wahlberg and his partner, they go in and they're cutting the songs. They're really bad. They're heavy metal songs, but then they didn't pay their bill, and so they're trying to get them to release the tapes to them so they can make money so they can pay the bill. That circle and stuff. what I'm getting to is, you ever had people show up the studio who wanted to cut some songs and they absolutely stink?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of that. So what we had, like, so I worked a lot with Puffy and his artists back then,
right.
which was, yeah, he was not the nicest guy back then. And so, but he was, running a production company. So he would like try these different singers and stuff. So like a lot of times there'd be a session with a singer or something that we've never heard of. And so then there's some producer will come in with his drum machine and lay down the tracks. We would take all the outputs of the drum machine, lay it onto 2-inch tape. And then the rapper would come in, or singer, whatever, rapper, and rap over it. And yeah, sometimes there's a bunch of sketchiness there, like it's just not that great. But that's normal for the music business, right? You're just trying to find a new artist,
right?
You're trying to work it out. So
what do you do in times
normal.
like that? Do they ask you for your opinion? Do you voice your opinion, or do you just go, I get paid by the hour?
Yeah, well, I guess it would depend if you're the engineer or if you're the producer, right? Because if you're the engineer, you just got to shut up and press record, right?
Yes, I think if you're the engineer, you can. I wouldn't give opinions about that kind of thing unless they really asked me, and then I would be very gentle. And yeah, certainly anyone lower than an engineer, like an assistant engineer, you literally don't say anything about that ever. You just ignore that. Like, even if they ask you, I don't know what you would say. Like,
you go, no habla inglés,
or you just be like, yeah, man, it's cool. But I don't know.
Just nod and smile, right?
Yeah, you want some more milkshakes?
Milkshakes for everyone.
So how far away was this milkshake place that it became milk? Like, were they sending somebody like an hour away, or?
No, you know what it was? They ordered like $300 worth of food and a milkshake. So like,
and they put it all in the same box with all this hot food. And, okay,
exactly.
That's
silly.
Funny. I had a situation where I had to hold the tapes. In fact, this is actually, I think I told the story in my the Location Sound Bible book. Yeah. So this was DAT tape. We were shooting a film, and it was a low budget independent film, and we were about a month into production, and toward the last couple days of the final week, there was rumors going around that we might not get paid, and we heard they're out of money and all this kind of stuff, and so my rule of thumb is and my agreement with the producer from the beginning was, at the end of the week, I get a check, you get the tapes. I hold the tapes through the week. At the end of the week, you give me a check, I give you the tape. And then actually it wasn't a check, it was cash.
Yeah.
Because it was my first time working with these guys, and there was some rumors. So they would give me cash, and then I would give them the tapes, and then we would go. Then the final week came around, and at the last night, the producer came up to me and goes, "Here's your check. Can I have the tapes?" And I said, "Well, first off, it's cash." He's like, "Well, I don't have cash. I just got the check." And I said, "No worries. No problem. I'll take the check, and then tomorrow I'll go to the bank and cash it. And once I have cash in my hand, I'll meet you anywhere you want. I'll drive to, meet you in the middle or whatever, and I'll give you the tapes." It became a little bit of an altercation. They weren't that happy about it. Long story short, after like 6 or 7 phone calls, I got threats, and some of them were pretty like, I'm going to kick your butt and all this kind of crap. 365 days later, literally 1 year later, they ended up coming up with the cash. And then I could give them the tape. So for an entire year, I kept getting calls going, "Listen, man, we can't finish, cutting the film because you've got the audio, and our editor needs the audio." And I'm like, "Well, if you're paying an editor, you could be paying me to get the tapes back." And that was that. I ended up, if I remember correctly, I told the story in the book. Is unfortunately, when you're a small business owner, you got to protect yourself, because once they get the assets, once they get the tape or the recordings, that's it. Like, they don't owe you anything. They just walk away and never pay you.
Right. So. And that movie was Reservoir Dogs.
Quentin Tarantino, him and his $5 milkshakes. No, it was not that film. I don't want to talk about who that person was, because that's you live and learn, you move on.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of mistakes did you live and learn along the way during your music career?
Yeah, I mean, I was a very conscientious assistant. So I really learned, like one of the things that I sort of pride myself on back then is like I was very alert. I wasn't partying like everybody was partying, but I definitely wasn't. And like I was really trying to help the engineer when I was the assistant, right? So I got into a mindset of learning everything and being prepared, showing up early and having everything set up and having things that I think they might need later, having them right near me so I could easily just grab it and go. And also, knowing my way around a patch bay really well was key because in the middle of a session, they'll be like, yeah, plug in the H3000 on Send 6, bring it back on 54 and 55 or something. And it's like, that's all they say. And you got to hear all that and just do it. Like, or else they're going to be sitting there like, Chris, I don't hear it. There's, they push up the faders and mess with you. Chris, I don't hear it. Where is it? I'm waiting.
Right. Waiting on sound. Yeah.
So I was like really good. And that's why I think I got put on some good sessions. Like I worked a lot with, I worked on several projects with Nick Didia, who recorded some Stone Temple Pilots and a bunch of other stuff too. And he mixed a couple indie records at Soundtrack. And so I was his assistant whenever he came in, and he was great. He actually and I know you asked me about mistakes and stuff, but I can't really remember any tragic mistakes that I made.
Oh, look at that. Chris Curran is perfect.
You're just so perfect.
No. A lot of small mistakes, but I can't remember, like, it wasn't like, oh, I lost a tape or you know what I mean? Like, I don't remember anything major.
Nothing that would get you fired.
Exactly. Yeah. But certainly a lot of stuff, a lot of little things. Sure. I mean, that's a given. But Nick was great because after one session, he's like, yeah, I got tickets for Pink Floyd at Yankee Stadium. I can't go. You want to go? And I was like,
yes,
dude.
Of course.
My God. He's like, all right, here's the tickets. And I'm like, what is it? One ticket, 2 tickets? It's 4 tickets. Wow. And I'm like, well, where are the seats? It must be whatever. 4th row. And I'm like, at Yankee Stadium, Pink Floyd. And so I called, my one roommate came and I called 2 friends. And it was like one of the greatest evenings of our lives. We walk into Yankee Stadium and they're like, oh, let's see your tickets. Look at the ticket. They're like, oh, man, keep walking toward the stage. Oh, just keep going. You go like 100 more feet. Keep going. Oh, my God, keep going, dude. Anyway, it's like, it's so interesting how some people at that level of success, they're just so generous and like they just don't think anything of it. But from my position, it was like a life experience. You know what I mean?
I got tickets once. Quig, who actually was one of the music producers, he shot videos and stuff, music videos for Eminem. And actually, you went to Russia with Quig.
He was a producer on that.
So he did stuff with Interscope, and they were, at one point, they were connected with U2. So U2 came into town at the Silverdome, which is no longer here, but it's just this big, football stadium in Detroit. And they were doing 2 shows, and Quig was like, would you like tickets to the show? I'm like, oh my gosh, absolutely. He goes, well, I'll tell you what, I can get you backstage for the meet and greet. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to meet the boys. Let's do this. And so the first show, I said, I'll be there for the second night. And so there was apparently some miscommunication because he calls me after the show and he says, hey, where are you? I'm like, I'm on my couch watching Law and Order. I'm not going to the show till tomorrow night. He's no, it's the first night. I got you meet and greet for the first night. I'm like, dude, I'm at home. So I missed my opportunity to meet Bono and the boys. Yeah.
Oh,
they wouldn't have liked you.
They wouldn't have. No. I didn't. My soul patch had not grown in yet at that point. No, they wouldn't have recognized me.
Do you have a favorite gig? Favorite band?
Favorite project that I worked on? Okay. Yeah. Yes. The answer is yes. And it's because of not only because of the experience, but it's also because of the album that came out of it. And it was Monster Magnet, which I worked on. Alan Mulder mixed it, and I was his assistant at Soundtrack in Studio A on the Neve VR. And Dave Weindorf, who's the singer and songwriter of Monster Magnet, was there. And for like probably 2.5 weeks, we were there mixing that record. And first of all, working with Alan Mulder, it was amazing because he's just a great engineer, and he had this, a lot of engineers add like kick and snare samples. Mm-hmm. They'll add them to the actual recorded kick and snare. They'll like sneak them in the background just to either to beef it up or to add a little like Andy Wallace, the one he always used or used a lot was to add a little, almost like little bit of reverb, like a tiny bit of really early reflection stuff to a snare to make it sort of pop. But anyway, working on Monster Magnet was great. And it's the funny thing about that session. Well, that album is awesome. I mean, I can listen to that album and I'm like, it's just a great album. And I was there like when it was mixed. It's so cool. But Dave Weindorf, we like downstairs from Soundtrack on 21st Street, like probably literally 100 feet down the road on 21st Street, there was a pretty high end club for like strippers dancing. I don't know. I forget what you call that. What do you call that? Strip club? Okay, strip club. Anyway, they used to close at 4. So and Dave somehow figured out that the dancers come out around 4:15. So like we had to have our session done by about 4:05, 4:10.
You could catch them in the parking lot on their way to their cars, right?
He would just literally go stand in front of the car, like, and just wait for all the girls to come out. I don't know what he did. I didn't go there with him, but
we know
so
what
funny.
He did.
I'm sure in his mind he's thinking that's the magical time, and for all the dancers, they're like, I want to go home. I've been on my feet all night.
No kidding.
Totally. Yeah, so that was a great record. Monster Magnet, Dopes to Infinity. That's the name of the record.
Dopes to Infinity.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got a chance to work with Foreigner, right?
Yeah, so we actually did overdubs in Studio I.
How many studios are there in this place? Like, what letter did it go up to?
Soundtrack, I think it went up to I or J. I think J. So, yeah, maybe there was like 8, 9, 10
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there was only one big live room, really. All the other studios were basically like mix rooms.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
There would be like a vocal booth, but not a big studio space. So that's why they could fit so many. And some of the studios were pretty small. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, they came in to do overdubs. It was just one session, and we just did overdubs. So Mick was there, and yeah, it was one of those things I worked on that just, it happened so quick, and it was only one day. That's why that, like, it was great, but like, you know, it's sessions like that usually you don't end up getting credit for, because it's just like a one day overdubs, and they're like, you know, they're not going to give you credit for that kind of thing, but it was fun.
I want to know what love is.
Stop.
Oh,
We don't have licensing rights. But seriously, though, the falsetto is on point.
Thank you.
So so at what point did you get out of the music business? Are you still tied to that? Do you still dabble in that at all? Or have you kind of like walked away from that and kind of went full time into podcasting now?
Yeah. So in '96, I left. I left New York City. I stopped working in those big studios, and then I just was producing bands on the side, which I did a little bit of, not a ton. Yeah, so those years in New York City, that was basically the only time that I worked with big artists and all that stuff. Like I said, I worked on some independent projects in Jersey over the next 8-10 years. Nothing major, and of course, one thing I did learn actually was that. Because one of the things I thought in my head was like, look, I have this background. I have all this knowledge. Like, I know how to make records. And I'm not saying I'm the best record producer or I'm the best engineer. I certainly don't have as much experience as most engineers, actually. But I thought, you know what? I can go work with local bands and I can make records with them, right? I know enough to do that. But the thing is, I realized none of those bands have money. and I was like, really, guys? So anyway, that was rough. So yeah, so I stopped working on major stuff, and then I worked on independent stuff, and then I got into podcasting in 2012. And yeah, I mean, for the last 15 years, I haven't worked on any music at all. In fact, I've never even mixed any music in a DAW on my computer. Like, I've never actually mixed a song from scratch on my computer, which is actually something I'm going to try doing it at some point, because I'm kind of like a plug-in maniac. Like, I have a lot of plugins. I know there's probably people with way more plugins than me, but yeah. So for the last 8 years or so, I've just been in podcasting.
Well, I think we should. I think we're going to call it a day here for this show, and I think when we come back for part 2, let's talk about podcasting, the podcasting engineering school that you have, which is podcastingengineeringschool.com. And then I want to find out about your plugins and some more tips and tricks. Plus, Gary and I really want to know, since you're the podcast expert, what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? So we'll let you kind of critique our show as well. So that's it for today. We will catch you guys next time with Mr. Chris Curran of the Podcast Engineering School.
Is that it?
I think so.
Where's my check?
Stop asking for your check.